Hello! Today we're going to learn why thought transmission and the law of assumption is screwing you up and how to solve that. Heyo! If you don't know who I am, my name's Tim. I've written multiple best-selling books on the teachings of Neville Goddard. So I have a small inkling, at least, of what the heck I'm talking about when it comes to Neville and the law of assumption. I've also helped hundreds of people over the years integrate Neville's ideas, as well as a lot of other great manifesting ideas, into their life more fulfillingly, whether that is in terms of relationships, in terms of work-life balance, in terms of finances. And what always surprises me is the dogmatism that plagues, and I don't say that word lightly, plagues the Neville Goddard law of assumption community. Having been into these teachings for, a fair amount of time, over a decade, having thought about these ideas extensively and tried to apply them into my own life as best as I could and can. And as I said, having helped many others do the same, I'm always blown away by how much dogmatic, kind of black and white thinking there is when it comes to a lot of Neville Goddard's advice. And just to be blunt, I mean, those of you who are familiar with this channel already know this. I just think that social media has totally perverted and misinterpreted most of Neville's teachings. And by social media, I specifically mean Reddit, which is just like the worst place probably for most of you to learn about Neville and how to actually apply that stuff in a way that feels fulfilling and sustainable. And I also mean YouTube, because there's so much sensationalism, and there's all of these quote-unquote law of assumption coaches talking about everyone is you pushed out, and creation is finished, and all these great catchphrases. But there's very much a lack of practical advice to help you actually apply Neville's ideas into your life with any type of consistent success or fulfillment. You might have some big manifestations, especially when you start. Often when you start, something big happens and you go, oh my God, this stuff is real. But then you will often find that sustainably doing that stuff again and again is not easy or doable for a lot of you. And my point is not to say that you can't have sustainable manifestations in the way that some of these people online talk about. You can. It's that for many of us, there's going to be easier and alternative ways to get there that feel a lot better and that line up with our sensibilities a lot more than just, for instance, trying to do sats every night and it not doing what we want, or robotically affirming, or doing all of these silly things that we read about on like the Neville subreddit. And I moderated the Neville subreddit for a brief period of time. I'm very familiar with it, and it's a toxic place. It really is a toxic place. I just don't think people are being honest with themselves when it comes to what they read about on there. A lot of the success stories are true. That's fine. But the way people portray this stuff, it's like, oh, anybody should be able to get this. You just do this, or you just read Neville. Man, it's not how it works. To be blunt, 90% plus of you, probably close to 95%, maybe 98% of you are going to fail applying law of assumption ideas mid to long term by following the advice on Reddit and other places. Just not going to work for most of you. Sorry. There's so much more to the stuff that Neville's talking about. And there's so many comparable teachings that line up with what Neville's talking about. If you get out of that very small box, one might say Pandora's box, that is something like the Neville subreddit or the law of assumption community on YouTube or elsewhere. Which brings me to the selection of a book I'm going to read from today, which is actually called the selection. The part of the chapter is called Pandora's Box, and it. I think this is going to clarify things for some of you, and for some of you, it might not. If you need more clarity, this is what I do. I help clarify ideas when it comes to law of attraction, law of assumption, manifesting, spirituality. I try to clarify them so you can better integrate them into your lives. If you want help doing that, I have a feeling I might be able to help you. You can reach out below, link in the description. I'll give you a free consultation if you think I can be of help. The book I'm reading from today is called The Mystical Eye by Joel Goldsmith. And if you're new here, you probably never heard of Joel Goldsmith. If you're not new here, you have heard of Joel Goldsmith. Joel Goldsmith is an example of a teacher who is just as good as Neville. And there's many teachers, in my opinion, in terms of effectiveness and power and profundity that were just as good as Neville. Now, of course, listen, I'm not a dogmatist. Everybody's different. Everybody has their own sensibilities. But the point of the matter is if you get outside of this very small fucking box that is the Neville community, if you actually take your blinders off and look around and look at some of these other wonderful new thought law of attraction type of teachers, you're going to realize that all of them are saying similar things, and that many of them might be actually more helpful to you than the stuff that Neville is saying. That is not an indictment of Neville. That is an indictment of the cult that surrounds Neville's teachings online. That is fucking bullshit. I want to read this Goldsmith passage because it really gives a stark contrast to what we usually hear when it comes to applying these ideas, applying your imagination, that God is your imagination, that I am God, right? And it also talks about what is often labeled thought transmission in the law of assumption community from just a much more clear and open space, which is, again, just in my opinion, so much more freeing than the very dogmatic interpretation of thought transmission that we hear about in the Neville community. And everyone is pushed out in all those, nonsensical interpretations of what Neville said. Goldsmith says, for instance, when it comes to thought transmission, that if you get still enough and there's somebody who wants to be healed or connect with God, if they are aware of you and you are aware of them, then that's the connection. You go to a lot of healers. I went to an energy healer a couple weeks ago, and it was like, when I was in her presence, I was letting her in, and she knew that. Often, you go to alternative healers, and it's like they ask you permission. Do you allow me to go into your energy field, basically, or whatever term you want to use? And if you say yes, well, then you're transmitting energy to each other in some way. Listen just to how Goldsmith describes that in this passage. But before we even get into that, listen how he talks about I am, and this idea of I am God, and this idea of this I understand the law of assumption now, so I'm this great person, right? Which sounds ridiculous, but is the kind of portrayal and the worship of false idols that we see on YouTube all the time. And it's absolute nonsense. Again, this section in the book is called Pandora's Box. It's from the chapter Impersonalizing God. Impersonalizing God. What a great title. And it's from the book The Mystical Eye by Joel Goldsmith. The link will be in the description. Goldsmith writes here, in the teaching of truth, you are faced with a situation comparable to Pandora's box. Pandora's box was supposed to have hidden within it a great treasure, but when it was open, evil jumped out. So it is, too, that truth is the greatest treasure there is. But if you open the door of truth to the unprepared thought, the truth that I am the truth will be prostituted, because it will flap its wings and say, I am God, I am God. And those persons who have so little understood the truth will try to be God to you. To persons unprepared for this truth, the revelation of I can be destructive because they may attempt to use it for personal gain, and also because it gives them a false sense of I, which makes them believe that an individual has power. The truth is that no individual has power because I am all power. I am omnipotence. An individual has no power. You of yourself have no power. You can never direct power. You can never use power. When you know the secret of I, you abide in stillness and let I do its work. Not you, I that is in the midst of you. You need no thoughts, since you cannot and need not enlighten God. The very fact that you have reached out to an illumined consciousness is the connecting link between you and God. Then all that illumined consciousness has to do is to abide in God, and God meets your need. The part your consciousness plays when it has been illumined is that it has awakened. It has had enough of the unveiling to know that the I of you and the I of anyone turning to you is God, so that there is no need to transfer thought to him, to transfer power to him, or to use God power for him. It is the Father's good pleasure to give him the kingdom, the good pleasure of the Father, the I in the midst of him. I in the midst of you is mighty, but the I in the midst of you is in the midst of him because of omnipresence. Therefore, you do not have to project your thought across the miles. You have only to abide in the stillness, and because the I has been unveiled, the truth has been unveiled. If you know I, why do you have to reach out? Is there not an I in you? Do you not say I all the time? And is not I God? Therefore, abide in stillness. Understanding the nature of God as I is the treasure, but in revealing it, it will prove to be evil if it comes to the awareness of the unillumined. Those who think that a personal sense of I is God, that any person can yield God power or can wield God power, or that some person is specially favored by God and therefore can do better for you than one of the other God-realized practitioners. All of this can be evil because it is personalizing. Learn to impersonalize. Only when you impersonalize can you become still inside and let I do the work and not think of it as the I of you. Remember, there is an I in the person you are helping as well as in you, and it is the same I, the one and only I. Let it do the work without words and without thoughts, and then the personal sense of I will not get in the way. Whew! Joel Goldsmith, man. That's some powerful stuff. I really suggest checking out this book. I can never say that. Illumined? Is that how you say that? Unillumined? Illumined? I apologize for my pronunciation. This is so much of this stuff. Goldsmith talks about in this book as well, and this is based on lectures. You actually can find many of these lectures on YouTube. Goldsmith talks about when you go to like a spiritual practitioner, right? We talk about this all the time on the channel too. It's like recognizing God is right here. And if you sit with someone who's recognizing God is right here, and you're sitting recognizing God is right here, there's no problem. And so healing can take place. Whether that's, healing of a physical ailment, mental healing of some other kind, financial healing, relationship healing. That's a lot of this kind of, deep energetic work, you could say. I just thought I would read that passage because it really contrasts the dogmatic groupthink that we hear so often in the Neville law of assumption community with a totally different perspective, you could say, but it's actually saying the same thing as Neville, in my opinion, in many ways. And the reason we always come back on this channel when we use spiritual language, when we're using mystical language to describe manifesting and law of attraction ideas, we always come back to the present moment, because the present moment is always where, of course, we are. And it's always where God is. It's always right here, now. But when I recognize God, when you recognize God, it's not meant from a mystical perspective, you could say, as a personal thing. It's like I always say, what I am is such an overplayed term in this community, because people use it with so much self-centeredness, so much egotism a lot of the time. I am. What Goldsmith is saying, really, is I am nothing. I of myself can do nothing, right? Or to get even more mystical or non-dual, you could say, another great non-dual teacher, not a law of attraction teacher, Nisargadatta Maharaj, he would say, I am that. But when he said, I am that, he was really saying, I am not that a lot of the time. That's what Goldsmith's getting at here. This is the deep shit. And we can integrate it into our life by stop personalizing our manifestations and saying, I did that, I manifested this in the past, I want to manifest this in the future. On a practical level, that can sometimes be fine. Don't get me wrong. That can be completely fine on a practical level, doing that. But if you want to get deep and still within yourself, you should stop thinking about that and realize that God is here right now, and that is what you are right now. And you recognize that in and of itself, from a meditative moment-to-moment perspective, is peace and fulfillment. Yeah. If you're interested in this approach, just, alternative mystical approach, you could say, to Neville and some of these other law of attraction teachers, I'll put videos below, more Joe Goldsmith videos that I've done. As always, just utilize what works, whether it's super practical, super psychological sounding, like Emile Coué, who we always talk about on this channel, or whether it's super mystical sounding, super spiritual sounding, like this excerpt from Joe Goldsmith that we just read. Enjoy.